Hey everyone, it's Andy here from Saving to Invest. And today I just wanted to touch on the ongoing debacle that is the extended unemployment rollout. And there was a very interesting report today from the Century Foundation that actually showed that all these unemployment delays across the different states have cost close to $17 billion in unpaid claims or claims that should have been paid from January 2nd when the extended program went into effect. So it's pretty sobering to see this estimate and sort of see someone quantify the impact. So I just wanted to cover that today, give some updates on where things are, and sort of provide some options for people still waiting to get their unemployment claim processed, and especially the 11-week extension that is now being slowly rolled out across most states. As always, if you find this information here useful, please hit the subscribe button to keep getting new videos. And if this information was useful, hit the like button. That helps me keep making more videos like this. So these are the headlines people are seeing across all the different states. It's not surprising the unemployment backlog is hitting many jobless Americans. You can see in Texas, uh, the backlog after unemployment benefits briefly expired. A lot of states said they'd have no interruption. That's not true. They had no interruption if you were getting benefits, but if you had exhausted your benefits or you had a special case or you had been waiting for retroactive payments under the CARES Act, you had delays. I mean, this is, I think most states have acknowledged that it wasn't smooth. There was definitely interruption for a lot of people. Part of it was attributed to, the COVID relief bill being approved a few days before the end of the year, which left very little time for states to change it. They knew these changes were coming, but because no official funding, they couldn't officially start work. But there's part of that. Then once the Congress approves it, then the Department of Labor has to provide guidelines for states. So there was some delay due to that. I'll say that's a fair call, but it's almost mid-February, and there's still several states that have not rolled out these extended 11 weeks that was provided for that should have been paid from the week of end of week ending Jan 2nd. So it's hard to say that this was done smoothly by any means, and there's still a lot of backlogs. There's still people struggling. So states have said they're paying a record number of claims, but it's clear that there's still many claims. New Jersey, Virginia, Florida. There's a lot of delays. I've got lots of comments and readers' stories on my YouTube, my blog, my social media channels. Massachusetts, one of the better states, is still having a lot of people on PUA and PEUC programs waiting for benefits, and it's taking a long time. And the last thing I like there is, the 17.6 billion in benefits because of all the delays. So this is CNN's information. So obviously it's based on Department of Labor, and some of it's estimated because you won't know for a few months how it's coming out. But what's this meant is the job relief data, which I posted a video on recently, shows that the job growth is improving, unemployment claims are falling. But a lot of the reason they're falling is because they just haven't been played because the systems have not been updated for the 11-week extensions. New Jersey is probably one of the worst states. My article there on their unemployment rollouts, which I'll link to below, is just shocking. They said there'd be no interruptions, and they said there'd be 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and it's just been ongoing. And they keep blaming their computers and systems. People on the PUA program are still waiting for payments, which means they don't get the $300 extra weekly payment. And it's just really sad to see the 700 plus comments I've got, specifically around New Jersey, which has been horrible. Virginia has been another really bad state for that. They've finally got their last PEUC program rolled out over the weekend, but still, there's a lot of people who are not played. And when you get flagged for fraud or additional documentation, it goes into manual processing, and so this backlog of claim keeps growing because they have to be reviewed by the agents at each of these centers that are already stretched. So it just sort of becomes a problem, a vicious cycle. So people can't get information because the claim centers are too busy dealing with the system rollouts and processing new claims or existing claims that are valid, and then it just becomes a vicious circle. So it's pretty bad. California, one of the worst states, the EDD. It's a lot of them, they keep blaming their IT vendor for the fact that they keep having delays and cost overruns because they all had limited funding under the different stimulus bills to roll these out. So California, the EDD, a lot of challenges for the PUA and the PUC claims. Reports are that they just are canceling claims that if people don't respond or don't, people are getting supposed to be notified, but they miss it, goes to spam, and they don't check the email. People don't have access to computers. They've lost money because they can't afford their phone plan. It's just a debacle how it's being rolled out. And so you can see these headlines reflect the challenges that many are seeing. So you're not alone. It's affecting everyone, and it just seems to be getting worse. And in terms of quantifying it, so the Century Foundation, I'll link to their full article below, but it really is I like the way they've quantified it, and it does reflect the fact that there are states, definitely some good states like Minnesota, North Carolina, Maryland, that really were able to get it out pretty quickly. They were able to roll out the PUA updates, the PUC updates for the extra 11 weeks, which then meant that people could get the $300 FPUC payment for those 11 weeks. They were able to get it within the first week or two of the program being up and running, and that was to most claimants. There's always going to be the special cases which have to be manually processed, but they were able to get it out pretty quickly. But then, of the 40 states paying it out, only 12 had a more than 2 week delay. You know, 38 started paying out PUC after 2 weeks. 15 states, and you can see it here on this map. The red and the orange are the worst ones that took over 3 weeks to get it out. And where this is for January data, so we're already mid-February, and it's still these states, and you'll probably recognize the bad ones there: New Jersey, Virginia. You'll see it there, and it's just either they have no information or they haven't confirmed, but they're only paying it to certain groups. And even with the states that are paying it, I do know, for example, like in Texas, or even in California, while they're saying they said paid in 2 weeks and none, and this is for PUC, the PUA is pretty bad, and so it's been mixed, and even groups that think they should be getting paid in states are not, because they didn't hit certain criteria, didn't provide the documentation, they got called for fraud. So it's a very mixed rollout across the states, and that's a sad thing. It's a federally funded program with federal guidelines, but every state has had a different rollout, and as you've probably seen, it's been just a challenge everywhere. Everyone's seen it. So it's the cost of this is staggering. And what was interesting is, if you look at this in a different way, this graphic shows you what people should have been getting, the predicted, because if it was implemented by the week ending January 2nd, this is what on average. Again, this is based on Department of Treasury data. Century Foundation did the analysis, which I found was really interesting. The beginning of the program, as expected, they predicted if everyone who's supposed to get benefits got it, it'll be an average $11.61 billion in unemployment paid. They only paid 5.1 billion, so only about half was paid. And mostly there's people who are in active claims who kept on rolling. They could claim weeks. They kept on getting paid normally. So those are the first group that got it out. But then you saw it steadily improve. So by the end of January, it was getting better, where they were almost paying 67% of what they should have been paying. This has improved in February, but what you can see, it's nowhere near what it should have been. And what's worse is people added more jobless grew, they became eligible for this. These numbers don't reflect that, but it does show that workers received almost 40% less they could have if it wasn't interrupted. So for people that say, oh, this hasn't cost a lot of money, this data does confirm that it did have a pretty significant impact, and that the delay in rolling this out, the delays these were coming, has caused a huge impact. And I hope that with the Biden extensions coming at the end of March, for probably another 6 months, and I'll post more updates on that. I hope that these programs, when they get extended again, that the states now have lessons learned from this. I know the systems are old; they're dependent on funding from the different states, but I hope they heed this lessons learned. This this slide is just really, I want to summarize this. I've been doing this for every state, so you can see some specific state pages on how they're rolling out for the different programs. This classifies by claimant and the two big programs, PUA and PUC. Obviously, if you qualify for one of these programs, you will get the regular $300 a week. But you can see what I try to do here is the check marks show sort of where it's pretty much rolled out in 95% of states, and then question mark is whether it's still not very great or it's going pretty poorly. And I was going to have an X for where it's completely not rolled out, but I think most states have got some level of it out. There's a lot of manual processing, so this doesn't this is more like a heat map to show where they are. So if you're an active regular claimant, you're pretty good in terms of getting benefits, and those have expired. The PUC is what you can do when you've used up your regular UI or extended state benefits. It's a bit questionable. The PUC is available for those people, but again, that 11 weeks is not easy. They have to do some manual steps, and a lot of states are still struggling to process it and almost doing it on a manual case-by-case basis. This is the case, for example, in Illinois. The IRS has said that they're going to evaluate every PUC extension by manually. The middle column, which is the active claimants, here you can see with my pointer here, that's actually gone pretty well. Came out pretty quickly. Again, it was simple because people just already had weeks they could keep certifying, and so they just got the $300 added on. And it's only when they exhausted their benefits, they ran into issues trying to get those extra 11 weeks. And so Those extra 11 weeks is where it's questionable, both for the PUA and PUC program. The PUA, a lot of states are getting better. They've added those 11 weeks for a lot of the PUA people. And then PUC is still a challenge. I think that's because the challenge with PUC becomes because it's an extension to regular unemployment, they have to check if your benefit year has changed. And if your benefit year has changed, then they have to reapply for regular unemployment. They can't put you back into extended state benefits. You have to go into PUC. So because of the rules that came up under the 11-week legislation, under the COVID relief bill or the CAA Act, it's made the PUC program a bit more complicated, and a lot of states just having to do the manual processing. So a lot of people are seeing delays there. Similar with new claimants after December 27th, you only backdate as part of the new legislation up to the beginning of December. But for new claimants who are filing a new claim, they've had a lot of challenges. This has sort of been the last group that really has been able to use this 11-week extension. So they have to provide a lot more new documentation. I've posted a whole video on the PUA documentation that had to be done for that. And then PUC, same thing. That's also been delayed for new claimants. They are pretty much manually having to check people again. They want them to apply for regular UI, and then if they use regular UI, they can go to PUC, whether it's the original 13-week program or the 11-week extension. So I'd say it's questionable in most states, unless you're an active claimant. But it is slowly happening. It is slowly being rolled out. So there is some hope out there. So, in summary, I think the situation has been pretty bleak and the rollout has been pretty bad, especially, most people knew this was coming, even despite the political turmoil at that point in time. But the 11 weeks of extensions are being added. I'm seeing a lot more people getting it. I'm seeing a lot more people have issues, and I think they're able to get through to the state UI agency who are getting through the backlog of claims. And that was a delay. People were just stuck in a backlog for manual processing. So that's getting a bit better. I do also know that there are still thousands of people waiting, and I've just recently wrote an article where some options on what to do if you're still waiting. Definitely use resources like your local representatives. Make sure you're reading all the fine print. Check social media. Sometimes that gives you better updates. I'll provide some phone numbers you can even use to get there. But you got to be persistent and patient. I know this doesn't help people who need this money to pay their bills or just get food on the table for their families, but the states are working through it, and they will give retroactive payments. So even if you get paid in February, you should get retroactive payments all the way back to January if you can certify for this week. So keep being persistent, keep trying to call. There is some traction on this in this month. I've seen it. So there's over probably about 200,000 across, and this is again my estimate from what I've seen of the different sources of manual claims. So these are people who had either very complicated cases, or their state has specifically said, for example, they've moved benefit years, or they need to provide new documentation, or they got flagged for fraud in a previous claim. So when they're trying to do the extended claim, they get flagged for fraud again, or they filed a new claim when they shouldn't have. They should have waited for the state guidance before filing the new claim, but they did. So it sort of creates two claims in the systems, which then means it has to go to manual processing by an agent. So all these manual claims and some of the retroactive payments, their states are working through it. They're bringing down those backlogs. I know California, EDD, Florida has a lot. They're working through it, even New York State. So there's definitely states, especially if there are a lot of people who've filed unemployment. There's there, and fraud is a big factor, unfortunately, especially for the PUA program, where it's hard to validate wage information. There's been a lot more checks. The extension legislation is a lot more strict on ID verification, which is also being rolled out by states. So especially new claimants who have to submit documentation within 20 days. They have to go through an ID verification check. A lot of agencies are using third-party vendors for those ID checks, like ID Me. So that's taking some more time to roll out and set up. So also make sure if you're getting claims and official notifications, read them. Don't just ignore them, because they could be asking for additional checks that are required as part of the new legislation. Just so make sure you file it, otherwise your claim could potentially stop and you'll be facing longer delays. And then, like I said before, I hope there's a strong chance, I'd say highly likely, that Biden will be extending the PUA and PUC programs in the FPUC program, which is a $300 payment, which could go up to $400 for another 6 months or 24 weeks as part of the new $1.9 trillion Biden relief bill that he's got in place there. So I hope states know that that's going to come. It's almost certain. So hopefully they can plan ahead and get these things updated before then, because we're going to end up in the same mess in a few months if that's not the case. Keep track of what's happening with that legislation. Make sure you're planning ahead, because I as much as I'd like to say they'll do it, I think there will be a delay, because unfortunately they can't do any work because they don't have any funding. but I hope they do. But that's definitely going to come. So this could be, the third round of these poor rollouts, and you'll probably see the same headlines I showed you a few slides ago. Anyway, I hope this information at least gave you some insight into some of the delays. You're not alone, and if you liked it, please hit the like button and subscribe to keep getting more updates like this, especially around the new unemployment programs, the new stimulus that's coming out. I'll be posting more videos on those things as well, and obviously general money saving and investing ideas as well. Thanks. Bye.